It's time again for Talking Trade, sponsored by MMAC's World Trade Association and Michael Best Strategies.
Welcome to Talking Trade. I'm Sandi Siegel, president of MEJ.
And I'm Ken Wasylik, the managing director of EM Wasylik and Associates. It's great pleasure that we're having our guest today, Mark Rhoda-Reis from the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. He is the Bureau Director of the Export and Business Development Bureau. I've known Mark for a number of years, both when he was at the WEDC, now at DATCP, and he had his own private business, and before that in the corporate world. So welcome, Mark. And I have to tell you, you were the one that introduced me to one of my favorite wines, Vinha Verde from Portugal. I know it's a great summer light white wine, and so thank you again for that. So let's start off. Mark, thanks for joining us. Looking at, you're a great promoter of Wisconsin agriculture exports. Can you just give us an overview of 2022 and how it's turning out to be for Wisconsin ag industry?
Well, thanks, Ken, and thanks, Andy. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on Talking Trade. And you're right, it is a strong year, actually. In 2021, we hit a record year, $3.94 billion in agricultural product exports. That was up over 18% from the year before. And we'd had some challenging years, so that was good news to see. And then year to date, June, so our second quarter, we are already up 10% over that record amount. So it's shaping up to be a strong year. The folks we're talking to were up about 14%. The folks we're talking to in industry, they're telling us that should hold to some degree, maybe not to that same percentage rate, but certainly will finish out the year strong, is what they're thinking and seeing. And if we look at our top countries and our top products, so our top 5 countries make up about 2/3 of the total. The top 10 make up 3/4. So it is pretty highly concentrated in those. But the top 5, Canada's number 1, China 2, Mexico 3, Korea 4, and Japan 5. 4 and 5 can tend to jump around. A few of the European countries are in sometimes reach the top 5 categories, but each one of those is up from the previous year, and 3 of the 5 are up double digits. So Canada up 25%, Korea's up nearly 30%, and China's up 10%. Then Mexico, they're up 1%, so they've been struggling a bit economically, and the strong dollar has hit them quite strong, and some of the tariff issues that we had before. And then Japan, they're up about 7%, so still strong dollar, I think, is affecting them to a degree. And if we look at the top products that we have, when we break those down into 3 major categories, so dairy, which includes cheese and whey and those milk proteins, those are the major things that we would ship globally. That's up over 37%, nearly 38% actually. So quite strong around the world for cheese, which is good because we've had some challenges in the past couple years with those dairy product exports. Second strongest is crops. They're actually the largest category, but it's also the largest number of items that fit into that. So crops would include lumber and timber, as well as the grains and the corn, soybean, and milled grain products, but also the prepared food, sweet corn. We're a major exporter, for example, of canned sweet corn. So all of those fit into that category, and beverages as well. Ethanol would be part of that. That's about a 1.47, almost $1.5 billion. They're up about 14%. The dairy, by the way, was about nearly 300 million, 295. And then the third category, meat products, that's a little over 400 million, 421, and they're up a couple percent. So meat's been struggling a little bit. Meat, by the way, includes not only sausages and brats and meat cuts, but also bovine genetics and hides and furs. And all of those categories are looking good. As I said, they're not quite as strong as the others, but we'll see how the year plays out for us.
Sure. Well, it's always great when you come in, Mark, with great numbers. It's one of our feel-good shows for Wisconsin, and a lot of the great successes for exporters. And honestly, I'm a teeny bit surprised with how strong the dollar is, and you touched on that a little bit. Certainly a strong dollar is great in many levels and for importers, but often makes our export commodities a little less competitive. So are there areas where you're, seeing a big impact because of the strong dollar? Tell us about that a little bit.
Absolutely. And there was a New York Times piece that came across, and they were comparing December of 2021 to July of this year. And so already then, this is before a lot of the Fed activities that helped to push the dollar up. As we raise interest rates, typically that raises the dollar in general. But we're already seeing drops in all of those. So those major countries I mentioned, they were all dropping between 2 and 5 and even more percent. And certainly Mexico and Japan would, as I mentioned, were two of those. And those are headwinds going forward because, we see in the news, about the euro dollar exchange. We're almost at parity with euro and they're dipped below a bit. So that as the products become more expensive that way, because it just costs them more in their local currency to do that. There's a lag in that. Some of those orders are placed 2, 3, even more months out. And so I think that as time goes on, we'll probably see more of that. And some of that also is based on how quickly that's happened to someone. So is it something that's like a shock to their system, and then how long it lingers, because then it could push down exports more if it stays quite a bit longer. So that is a concern, one of the headwinds. But you're looking at the numbers. Record year last year, we're up this year. If you think about all the challenges we've had over the last 2 years, a few years actually, the supply chain challenges, the container shortages, the cost of shipping, the disruption in by COVID in these markets, some of the tariff, so the long list of things that we're looking at, you would think that we'd be down at this point. Right. But I think post-COVID demand has been so strong, and this is what the companies that we work with are telling us, that's actually been driving a lot of that need to be able to push those dollar sales up. And of course, inflation will pay a little part of that. We don't really have the data on the unit volume shipments to know, is it a lot more units and dollars or just dollars? But the inflation hasn't been that strong up to this point to say that it was all just inflation. But looking forward, those are concerns about where we think things might be heading for next year. The WTO put out a report that globally they're looking for trade not to be down, but only up a smaller amount. So that increase seems to be slowing. And we'll see once we get some of that forecasting that the USDA does, for example, for ag products, how that might look for 2023.
So that's great. Well, something we'll want to keep a close eye on, as I'm sure you are, and have you back as some of this unfolds. Terrific. Ken, you're going to wrap it up with?
Yeah, let me wrap it up with another real bright spot here. We're the dairy state, and we host the World Dairy Expo here in Madison at the Lion Energy Center. It's always a global attraction for anyone in the dairy industry. How was this year's Expo?
Great, in a word. There were a lot of folks at the show. 2020, we had the COVID, it was shut down. Last year, people weren't quite sure. A lot of countries couldn't travel, so the numbers weren't quite as strong. Not as many international folks, especially coming. But this year, if you were at the show, you saw a lot of activity, a lot of interest. The folks at the World Dairy Expo reported that this is the second highest number of animals at the show, and the daily average was quite strong for the number of attendees coming into the show. And we were quite positive. We had a global dairy symposium. So the Wisconsin Initiative for Agricultural Exports, that funding that for program that has come from the legislature, we're in now the second fiscal year of that. We just started up in February, but already through the second fiscal year with it. That we hosted that seminar, had 2 speakers from Europe, 2 from the US. And that room was at capacity, standing room only. So people were interested. First of all, you have to have people there just to show up in the first place. But secondly, they're interested to know. And that talk was around where those experts in the industry see the dairy world going. Now, the World Dairy Expo is mostly feed and genetics and a lot of equipment. So around the production of dairy products. But of course, those are the customers for all of those people who were selling those things. So there was quite strong interest in that. And if I can add, that Wisconsin Initiative for Ag Exports provides, as we talk about concerns and headwinds and looking at the year going forward, then you need to double down in your efforts to do promotion. You need to double down on your efforts to go see your customers. And so there's some support to do that. And there are two ways. One is the International Market Access Grant. That's with the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. Wisconsin Initiative for Ag Export funds feed into that and help companies to meet their customers overseas through a broad range of activities and means. And then we also have the Export Expansion Grant, second round of that. And that's for nonprofit organizations to be able to work with companies to grow their exports within particular sectors, dairy, meat, and crop. The application deadline for that actually is 16th of November, so it's coming up, but that provides between $50,000 and $100,000 for companies, or these organizations rather, to help ag export companies. So something that if people are interested, they should absolutely get a hold of us to talk about that.
Thank you for sharing that. I know so many of these grants are not well known and not taken advantage of, and there's a lot of terrific programs out there. So thanks for joining us today, Mark. That was a lot of great news, and obviously, we're all cautious, and as we, see what the fourth quarter brings and some of the challenges for all of us, but we'll have you back, and hopefully you'll continue to give us some positive news. This has been Talking Trade. Thank you again for joining us, Mark.
Very good. Appreciate the opportunity. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
You've been listening to Talking Trade, sponsored by MMAC's World Trade Association and Michael Best Strategies.